So, not the podcast, not a TikTok, Medium.
Right down the middle, baby.
Okay, so this week's topic was proposed by you. And so why don't you take us through it? Look, I'm delegating.
I can't remember exactly why I wanted to talk about this, probably because of my breakup, but I wanted to talk about boundaries in a relationship and what constitutes a boundary and what is a reasonable ask. And I think the word boundaries, you can talk to me about this. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hit you. You can talk to me about this as a therapy school student. Like, people are misunderstanding the word boundary, right?
I don't know. We actually don't talk about boundaries that much. I'm doing really kind of useless things in school these days.
I have been living in a state of confusion about boundaries. Like, what constitutes a boundary and what constitutes a rule or something that is unhealthy. So what I looked up was basically someone said a boundary is saying what you will do in response to something.
It's especially in a relationship, it's like, respect my boundaries, and at what point is it like, well, I'm just controlling your behavior?
I know. That's what I've had to deal with.
But I also think it's about finding people who your boundaries align, or that it makes sense to you, or that, like, understanding their boundaries is something that, like, you are able to tolerate, and that it doesn't prevent, like, a closeness or still having an adaptive relationship where you're getting what you want out of that relationship, right? Like, let's say, for example, like someone's like, my boundaries are that, like, I can't see my significant other during the week because I'm too busy and I need to only be with somebody who wants to hang out on the weekends.
Right?
Like, you need to respect my work, and that's a boundary for me. I mean, that's perfectly valid to say, but then the other person has to go, well, do I want to be with someone I can only see on the weekends?
Right.
And it's not about necessarily if the boundary should exist or not. It's are you okay in a relationship with those boundaries?
Like, someone can do whatever they want, but then you have to decide if you want to be there for it.
Yeah, or I just want someone that has a more flexible schedule,
right,
or whatever, and I think it's also a big thing that helps in this is why does the boundary exist, right? I think we all know that term now, and so it's very easy to throw out, but, like, cueing your partner into, and this is why a boundary for me is that I don't want you to touch me when we're in front of my family.
Right.
And so it's like, okay, well, that's a boundary, but why? And it's like, well, culturally, that's just not something that we do in my family, and it would make everyone really uncomfortable.
Right.
And so it's like, okay, now I understand that boundary.
Yeah.
Whereas if you just say the boundary, maybe someone won't get it, or they'll take it personally, or they'll assign the wrong reason to it.
Yeah. Okay. Vulnerability is incredibly hard for me. I find it extremely embarrassing. And I have had to really train myself to explain my boundaries, especially if it comes from, like, a traumatic place, or it comes from a past relationship or something like that. Like, I've really had to train myself to say, I was hurt in this past relationship in this way, to give the person, because I think the most important thing that I could give my partner right now is context. And so but giving context requires, like, sharing parts of yourself that it's so unnatural. Like, it feels unnatural coming out of my mouth. Like, I have to sit and force myself to be able to do this thing that I know will create a better relationship and will be, like, better for the future. But it is not my natural state. Like,
that's why they say relationships are hard.
Like, my natural state is, like, run away, avoidant, never see the person again. It's been really good because the person I'm dating now is, like, very healthy about this. But it's like, I have to sort of be like, no, what is the reason for this boundary? Why am I asking for this? What is the reason? What do I actually want?
It's hard because, there's some things that I don't want to ever talk about or share, but I also think that it's something that you can, like, get better at, like a muscle.
It really is. To me, it's like working a muscle every single time right now.
And then, like, having more results where things go well after sharing.
Exactly.
Because if you've had bad experiences, you're going to avoid it more. But if you're with somebody where sharing brings you together every time and is healing every time, then you won't always associate it with just fear and bad outcomes.
And for me, it's hard because I've had more bad outcomes than good outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know when the scales will be balanced in that regard. But like, yeah, it's maybe they never will be, but it's just trusting that there will be a good outcome.
I think there are like boundaries, and then I think there are like relationship terms. To me, like a boundary is like, I'm not willing to drop everything to hang out with you in the middle of the day because I have to protect my work time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But then I think there's also relationship terms that you agree to, where it's like, how do you relate in relationship to each other? And so like, to me, that is like respect, open communication, like an agreement that like if someone's not going to be with their phone, you know, then they're going to send you a text to let you know, like sort of just like the rules of how the relationship works.
Yeah.
And I think some of those rules can involve boundaries, but I think a boundary is kind of a separate thing.
I think it's just been misused on me so many times that I'm confused. Like, I had a curfew sometimes in my last relationship, and that was framed to me like a boundary. But then there wasn't really, it was framed as like, the response was, now I will be angry at you. And like make a whole, like, I don't know. And so I was trying to figure out if like, and then I will be angry at you is an appropriate like response or like way to, but I don't think it is.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, a boundary is like, if you curse at me on the phone,
I will hang up.
I will hang up.
If you stay out later than we agreed, I'm gonna be asleep.
Right.
Like, you could come home at this time and I'll be awake and we can talk, or you can come home at this time and I'll be asleep.
I guess, yeah. I mean, it's really hard. It's also like about like, because staying out late, it's different than, that's more about like someone else's life controlling their life, versus I think a boundary is how someone can treat you.
And these are not boundaries that I've set. These are ones that have been set towards me. And so that's why I'm deeply confused. Let me look it up.
Yeah.
Hold on. Boundaries in a relationship are like this. They help each person figure out where one person ends and the other begins. Expecting others to communicate during disagreements with maturity. That's what you said. Don't curse at me on the phone or I'll hang up. Letting go of codependency and having your own identity. Yes. So like, one boundary that my partner now has is that he plays dodgeball and that's his time with his friends. On Wednesdays, I can reasonably assume I might not see him, largely won't see him because that's his night with his friends. And my personal thing, and he didn't tell me to do this at all, but I said, like, because they all like to, there's dodgeball in West Hollywood is a cult, and I'll say that. So they're like, you gotta join dodgeball. And I was like, no. From the beginning, I was like, I'm not going to. Because this is his thing.
Right.
I don't need to make his thing my thing. And he's never said, don't join dodgeball. He's never said that. But I have said, I don't want to do that because I want us to have our separate nights. I don't want to have the same hobbies, you know, that kind of thing.
I think that's good, because I think in the past you wouldn't have had that.
Exactly. Okay, what are examples of unhealthy boundaries? Controlling behavior, trying to change someone, or someone doesn't want you to succeed or is made to feel guilty about doing things that interest them.
I mean, right, like, you can't be like, my boundary is you have to kiss me 10 times a day. You know?
That's a rule.
That like is I mean, how, like, what kind of rules do we have in a relationship? Like, I think there's one rule people should have, which is treat each other with mutual respect.
Yeah, but I don't like when you see like a thing where it's like, I don't let him follow girls on Instagram.
It's a rule, but it's, you know, right, there can be unhealthy boundaries where I think when we get into like, you know, controlling other people versus protecting your own space and health feel very different to me.
That's true. Yes, it's the difference between controlling someone else and controlling and being responsible for your own well-being and your own emotions, and taking yourself out of situations that you are not comfortable with, and not saying you must change so that I never have a negative emotion. To me, there's a lot of self-regulation that I've learned and that I'm learning, which is really good. Both the person I'm dating now and I can get like really scatterbrained when we're just starting to see each other. Like if he comes into my house or I come into his house, I'm like moving stuff or I'm cooking or I'm whatever. So I was like, when we first see each other, can we greet each other? Can we, like, when you first walk in, can we just like have a kiss or like an acknowledgement that the other person has arrived? And that's like been totally fine. And it's also now like a funny thing where like I like watch him buzz around and then go, and come over and kiss me.
Well, it's also like, you know, what are the reasons behind it? What's at stake if that doesn't help? What is the flexibility around it?
Right, you can't get so pissed. Like if he doesn't greet me, I'm not like furious for the rest of the day and ruining everything.
Well, because that's also what you said about self-regulation.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the good boundaries are involved with self-regulation, where you kind of figured out, okay, what do I need to be respected so that I can self-regulate and I can protect myself?
Mm-hmm.
And then what is, you know, being in relation with another person and having to account for like their actions not always being exactly what you want. It's great when two people want to resolve something instead of be right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's always helpful.
This was very serious.
Yeah.